It's not easy to live up to your name if you are named Light of the Faith. Noor Uddin Zangi did a fine job, which was graceful to his name. Noor Uddin Zangi was a formidable 12th-century Muslim leader known for his military prowess, strategic unification of Syria, and steadfast resistance against the Crusaders. Renowned for his deep piety and just rule, he strengthened Islamic governance through social reforms, the establishment of religious institutions, and fostering unity among Muslim states. His legacy laid the foundation for Salahidin's eventual triumphs, including the recapture of Jerusalem or Quds. Noor Uddin Zangi was a prominent Muslim ruler and military leader during the 12th century. He was a member of the Zengid dynasty, a Turkish dynasty that ruled over parts of modern-day Syria and Iraq. His leadership and policies significantly influenced the political and military landscape of the Middle East, especially during the period of the Crusades. Noor Uddin Zangi, standing against the invaders. The Second Crusades and the subsequent Crusader invasion of Egypt were a tumultuous period in history. Backed by religious zeal, the Crusaders repeatedly launched attacks on Muslim heartlands, seeking to capture territories right, left and center. Many Muslim leaders, rulers, and heroes rose to the occasion, leading the defense against the Crusaders across all fronts. Whilst the role of the likes of Sultan Salahidin is well known in the later part of the Crusades, there are many heroes that Muslim chroniclers often tend to overlook. One such name is Noor Uddin Zangi. Noor Uddin Zangi was the son of Imad Din Zengi, the founder of the Zengid dynasty and the conqueror of the Crusader state of Edessa in 1144, marking one of the first major Muslim victories against the Crusaders. After Imad Din's assassination in 1146, Noor Uddin succeeded him as the ruler of Aleppo and northern Syria. Right after the death of Imad Din Zengi, his sons, Noor Uddin Zangi and Saif Din, divided the kingdom among themselves. The former stationed himself at Aleppo, whereas the latter chose to be in Mosul. This was in stark contrast to what many Muslim sultanates, emirates, and kingdoms would often see. There was no war of succession or mutual rivalry between the brothers. Compare this with the wars of succession fought between princes of the Ottoman Empire or the Mughal Empire, and you'd see how devoted Noor Uddin and his brother were to their cause. The start of conquests. As soon as Noor Uddin came to power, his primary motive was to ensure no further lands are lost or cities are destroyed at the hands of the Crusaders. He made multiple attempts to reach out to other Muslim states of the region, seeking alliances against the crusading invaders. Nonetheless, Muslim history is marred by a lack of mutual trust and unity between rulers and leaders. Noor Uddin Zengi's times were no different. Despite having a matrimonial alliance with Noor Uddin Zangi, Mu'in din Una, the governor of Damascus, was reluctant to upset the Crusader states and often apprehensive of Zengi's intentions. In spite of it all, Noor Uddin Zangi managed to capture multiple key prospects in Asia Minor. By the time the Second Crusade led by Conrad III of Germany and Louis VII of France got there, Noor Uddin Zangi's successes had ensured that there was very little they could do to reclaim lost territories. The Crusaders attempted a failed siege of Damascus, following which Noor Uddin Zangi decided to push further towards the west. Things came to a face-off in the Battle of Inab, when Noor Uddin Zangi destroyed the combined forces of Prince Raymond of Poitiers and the Nizari assassins of Ali ibn Wafa. Following the battle, Noor Uddin marched all the way to the coast, symbolically bathing in the Mediterranean Sea, to assert his dominance of Syria. Noor Uddin Zangi in Syria. Right after the First Crusade, the Muslim rulers of Damascus had entered into bilateral treaties with the Crusaders. However, the bilateral part was mostly on paper. The Crusaders, ever keen on expanding their territories, launched the Second Crusade, despite the peace treaties being in effect. The rulers of Damascus, Mu'in Din, and his successor Mujir Din, were less than ready to confront the Crusaders for their unkept promises. In fact, Mujir Din went as far as paying an annual tribute to the Crusaders to save his seat in Damascus. Such was the animosity against his policies of submission that the population of Damascus rose against Mujib Din, and aided Noor Uddin Zangi in taking over the Syrian region. This is primarily why Noor Uddin Zangi had to assert his control over Syria. To keep the Crusaders in check, such actions were necessary. As there was now nothing the Crusaders could do in Syria, they were forced to look to the south if they wanted to expand their territory. The capture of Ascalon had already succeeded in cutting off Egypt from Syria, and Egypt had been politically weakened by a series of very young Fatimid caliphs. By 1163, the caliph was the young Al-Adid, but the country was ruled by the vizier Shawwar. That year, Shawwar was overthrown by Durgam. Soon afterwards, the king of Jerusalem, Amalric I, led an offensive against Egypt, on the pretext that the Fatimids were not paying the tribute they had promised to pay during the reign of Baldwin III. This campaign failed and he was forced to return to Jerusalem, but it provoked Noor Uddin to lead a campaign of his own against the Crusaders in Syria in order to turn their attention away from Egypt. The case of Egypt. Routed in Syria and the north, the Crusaders had very little to gain there. As such, they turned their attention towards the Fatimids in Egypt. Whilst the nominal ruler of the Fatimids, Al-Adid, was in power in theory, the Grand Vizier Shawwar ibn Mujib al-Sadi was the de facto ruler. Fatimids, being weak and leaderless, were no match when the Crusaders led by King Amalric I of Jerusalem attacked. Egypt fell quickly, and Shawwar approached Noor Uddin Zangi for assistance. Noor Uddin was unsure about sending his troops to Egypt and leaving Damascus defenseless, but was persuaded otherwise by his general Asad ad-Din Shirkuh, the uncle of Saladin Ayyubi. Asad ad-Din Shirkuh made quick gains in Egypt, routing the Crusaders yet again from Muslim lands. However, it was at this juncture that Shawwar, the ousted Grand Vizier of Fatimids, revealed his true intentions. He allied with King Amalric I, and effectively betrayed the Zengid forces led by Shirkuh. Noor Uddin's attack on Tripoli was unsuccessful, but he was soon visited by the exiled Shawwar, who begged him to send an army and restore him to the vizierate. Noor Uddin did not want to spare his own army for a defense of Egypt, but his Kurdish general Shirkuh was given permission to invade in 1164. In response, Durgam allied with Amalric, but the king could not mobilize in time to save him. Durgam was killed during Shirkuh's invasion and Shawwar was restored as vizier. Shawwar immediately expelled Shirkuh and allied with Amalric, who arrived to besiege Shirkuh at Bilbais. Shirkuh agreed to abandon Egypt when Amalric was forced to return home, after Noor Uddin attacked Anch and besieged the castle of Harenc. There, Noor Uddin routed the combined armies of Anch and Tripoli and captured most of the Crusader army's leadership, including Raymond III, Jocelyn III and Bohemond III, leaving three major principalities of the Crusader states leaderless. However, he refused to attack Anch itself, fearing reprisals from the Byzantines. Instead, he besieged and captured Bainears, and for the next 2 years continually raided the frontiers of the Crusader states. In 1166, Noor Uddin's Kurdish general Shirkuh was sent again to Egypt. Amalric followed him at the beginning of 1167, and a formal treaty was established between Amalric and Shawwar, with the nominal support of the Caliph. The Crusaders occupied Alexandria and Cairo and made Egypt a tributary state, but due to the unpopularity of the Egyptian alliance with the Crusaders, Shirkuh managed to take Alexandria without bloodshed. The Crusaders besieged Alexandria and famine set in quickly due to the city's limited stores of food. Shirkuh organized a sortie and broke through the enemy lines, leaving command of Alexandria to his nephew, Saladin. In the same year, Noor Uddin raided the county of Tripoli, in which he temporarily captured Ahremen Castle, Chustel Blanc and Jebel-Akar, exploiting the captivity of Raymond III. Ultimately, Amalric could not hold Egypt, while Noor Uddin still held Syria, and he was forced to return to Jerusalem. The siege of Alexandria was lifted, and Shirkuh's forces withdrew from Egypt as well. In 1168, Amalric sought an alliance with Emperor Manuel and invaded Egypt once more. Shawwar's son Khalil had had enough, and with support from Caliph Al-Adid requested help from Noor Uddin and Shirkuh. At the beginning of 1169, Shirkuh arrived and the Crusaders once more were forced to retreat. This time Noor Uddin's commander gained full control of Egypt. Shawwar was executed and Shirkuh was named vizier of the newly conquered territory. Shirkuh died later that year and was succeeded by his nephew Salahuddin. One last invasion of Egypt was launched by Amalric and Manuel, but it was disorganized and came to nothing. Salahuddin continued to swear nominal fealty to Noor Uddin until his death in 1174, but their relationship became increasingly tense. Saladin was reluctant to join forces with Noor Uddin against Crusader armies or holdings, withdrawing his own armies on several occasions when Noor Uddin's forces arrived to assist him. Noor Uddin's insistence that Saladin abolish the Shia Caliphate further raised tensions between them. Saladin was reluctant to do so because the authority of the Caliphate in Egypt was a source of legitimacy for his rule. He feared popular backlash and was bound by friendship and obligation to the Caliph al-Adid. Nonetheless, Saladin capitulated to Noor Uddin and the Fatimid Caliphate was abolished in 1171. During this time Noor Uddin was busy in the north, fighting the Artuqids, and in 1170 he had to settle a dispute between his nephews when his brother Qutb died. With Egypt conquered in his name, Noor Uddin believed that he had accomplished his goal of uniting the Arab states of the Levant. However, near the end of his life, especially after the death of Saladin's father Najm-ud-Din Ayyubi, Noor Uddin believed he could no longer trust anyone in Saladin's court to maintain the young ruler's fealty to him. Noor Uddin began preparations to invade Egypt and depose Saladin, but he was seized by a fever due to complications from a peritoneal abscess. He died at the age of 56 on the 15th of May, 1174 in the citadel of Damascus. He was initially buried there, before being reburied in the Noor Uddin Madrasa. His young son As-Soleh Ismail al-Malik became his legitimate heir, and Saladin declared himself his vassal, maintaining the de jure unity of Syria and Egypt under As-Soleh's rule. When As-Soleh died suddenly at the age of 18, Saladin defeated the other claimants to the throne and took power in Syria in 1185, uniting Syria and Egypt not just in name, as they were during Noor Uddin's reign, but in fact. According to William of Tyre, although Noor Uddin was a mighty persecutor of the Christian name and faith, he was also a just prince, valiant and wise, and according to the traditions of his race, a religious man. His sense of justice was never denied to anyone, regardless of their creed or origins. As a result of his justice, a Christian foreigner was said to have settled into Damascus, which was under Noor Uddin's reign. Noor Uddin was especially religious after his illness and his pilgrimage. He considered the Crusaders foreigners in Muslim territory, who had come to Outremer to plunder the land and profane its sacred places. Nevertheless, he tolerated the Christians who lived under his authority, aside from the Armenians of Edessa, and regarded Emperor Manuel with deep respect. In contrast to Noor Uddin's respectful reaction to the death of Baldwin III, Amalric immediately besieged Banias upon learning of the emir's death, and extorted a vast amount of money from his widow. One of Noor Uddin's major achievements was his effort to unify the Muslim states of Syria and northern Iraq. He skillfully navigated political challenges to consolidate power and bring together various Muslim factions, which had previously been divided and weakened by infighting. Noor Uddin was a formidable opponent of the Crusaders and is best known for his campaigns against the Kingdom of Jerusalem and other Crusader states. His military efforts included battles that reclaimed significant territories, such as in the aftermath of the Second Crusade when he defended Damascus from the Crusaders. Noor Uddin Zangi died in 1174 CE at the age of 56. While he had seen Egypt and Syria accept his authority, it was only when Sultan Saladin effectively brought the lands under one crown in 1185 that Noor Uddin Zangi's dream was fully realized. A lot can be said about the military career of Noor Uddin Zangi. An able commander and a skilled statesman, he left no stone unturned in his quest against the invading Crusaders. But what about Noor Uddin Zangi as a person? Thus writes William of Tyre, stating that Noor Uddin Zangi was a just prince, valiant and wise, and according to the traditions of his race, a religious man. Noor Uddin was an epitome of religious tolerance. When Baldwin III, the king of Jerusalem, died, it was expected that the Zengids would lead an attack on Jerusalem, taking advantage of the weakened situation. However, Noor Uddin Zangi decided otherwise, claiming, "We should sympathize with their grief and in pity spare them, because they have lost a prince such as the rest of the world does not possess today." Unfortunately, such gestures were not always reciprocated. Right after the death of Noor Uddin Zangi, Amalric I of Jerusalem immediately launched an offensive and extorted vast amounts of money from Noor Uddin's widow. Noor Uddin Zangi gave equal rights to the Christians and other non-Muslims living in Zengi-ruled territories. In fact, it was not the Crusaders or Christianity in itself that he was fighting against. he was displeased by the looting, marauding, and plundering that crusading armies would indulge in. He regarded such actions as profanities, and was determined to put an end to it. Noor Uddin constructed over 20 madrasas from his personal funds. He held a diploma in hadith narration, and scholars such as Sir Stephen Runciman have described him as a ruler who prioritized justice over everything else. During Noor Uddin's reign, 42 madrasas were built in Syria, of which half he personally sponsored. Through the construction of these madrasas, Noor Uddin was ensuring the creation of Sunni Islamic qadis and imams. Noor Uddin himself enjoyed having specialists read to him from the hadith, and his professors even awarded him a diploma in hadith narration. He had bimaristans, hospitals, constructed in his cities as well. One of them is Noor Uddin Bimaristan, and built caravanserais on the roads for travelers and pilgrims. He held court several times a week so that people could seek justice from him against his generals, governors, or other employees who had committed some crime. In the Muslim world, he remains a legendary figure of military courage, piety, and modesty. Sir Stephen Runciman said that he loved, above all else, justice. The Damascene chronicler Ibn al-Qalanisi generally speaks of Noor Uddin in majestic terms, although he himself died in 1160 and did not witness the later events of Noor Uddin's reign. The Islamist group Harakat Noor Uddin Zangi, active in the Syrian civil war in Aleppo since 2011, is named after Noor Uddin. With all of that said, Noor Uddin Zangi was a great figure and a person of exemplary courage, modesty, and piety. May Allah be pleased with him.